Ho buddies, welcome to Borderline Games. I'm Gareth and today we're playing Chaos Head. Last time we saved Nanami, Yua and Ayase from an earthquake, and then as we were pulling Nanami out we said, hey, I'm not actually your big brother, and I guess we're going to say that we're a delusion. And then it cut to this, where it says my memories are so cloudy. I don't know whether this is from Rimi's perspective or whether it's from Takumi's perspective, but let's find out. Oh, okay. That was how Nishijo Nanami felt. So that must be Rimi. Her brother's words had been the trigger in her heart. And now she felt as if she had two brothers. Oh, okay. Nanami. Her brother's words had been the trigger in her heart. And now she felt as if she had two brothers. However, what her heart told her was that it was not just as if she had two, but that she really did have two. Her mind flashed back to the past and she remembered her two brothers' faces. One of them seemed quite pathetic. One of them was covered in wrinkles. And yet despite these distinctions, she was still convinced that she only had a single brother. Something was not adding up. Something between her memories and her cognition. What was reality? What was illusion? She did not know, and that scared her. To escape this, she attempted to empty her mind of all thoughts. When suddenly her own voice audibly rippled outward. Nana, you need to stay strong. The next thing she knew, she was standing in a hallway, illuminated by the setting sun. She could smell disinfectant, and before her stood a rather plain door. She reached out toward it and took hold of the handle, and then, through no will of her own, her hand opened the door. Hey, this again. Are you seriously not going to eat, big bro? And this is Shogun. How many times do I have to tell you to eat? No. How many times do I have to tell you to eat up? If you don't eat, you're never going to get better. That's Nanami. Oh, jeez. Is it because of the peas? You're not a little kid anymore, big bro. When are you going to stop being so picky? Then again, I kind of hate peas too. So if you want to leave them off to the side, I get it. But still, you've got to eat everything else. If you don't, she's going to get really mad at me. You know, that super scary head nurse. She's Nanami. Yeah? I apologize for mistreating you so over the years. Or so much, maybe, I don't know. So this is, Shogun saying goodbye to Nanami, I guess. Huh? It really isn't like you to apologize. You don't need to overwork yourself for my sake anymore. I don't... What are you saying? I have to go into hiding. So, because of that, you don't need to come here anymore. Or is this before Takumi's created, and Nanami has to then be convinced that the other Takumi is the real Takumi, or something, maybe? What are you... This is goodbye. Oh. Maybe not. And that was where her memories cut off. Those memories about her real brother. Her brother had been suffering from a serious illness, leading her to graciously spend many years tending to him in the hospital. No matter how much time had passed, she knew she had to stay strong so that she could best take care of him in his time of need. For the past year and a half, these things had disappeared from her memory, entirely. She'd forgotten that those memories even existed. And in exchange for that, her brother had continued living on his own, in good health, right there in Shibuya. Her mother had asked her to routinely check in on him, leading her to sometimes drop by on the way home from school. And thus, she had done so, thinking nothing of it. After all, he was her brother. Checking in on him might as well have already been routine. She never housed any doubts about it. Why did I forget all about you? Nearly 30 minutes had passed since she'd been rescued from beneath the rubble, and now she'd finally been reunited with her real brother. There he was, lying still on the road. He was still breathing, but remained unconscious. His body was as small, wrinkled, emaciated, incredibly weak as she remembered. It was the brother from so long ago, whom she'd always known. This is just too much. I spent all my time lecturing you, all of it, but... Though her brother did not reply, she clung to his small body all the same, letting loose a flood of tears. Never did I ever think about forgetting you, big bro. You're so selfish. Really, how could you be this selfish? The sound of metal lightly scraping against something came from within her brother's clothes, and a moment later something slipped free from his pocket. Ah. Oh, the bangle. It was what Nanami had been searching for. When she lost her right hand, she lost it as well. A flimsy, cheap bangle with a snowflake motif. Confused, she stared at her real brother's face, but his eyes, buried in wrinkles, did not open in return. Nanami picked up the bangle with her left hand. She remembered how it felt to touch. It was her brother's first present to her. Nanami's greatest treasure. Nanami lifted her gaze, unconsciously searching for her other brother. He was holding a longsword, and his back was turned to her. But he was walking away. He was leaving this place, even without saying a word. Nanami could understand that much. The fact that he might leave without saying even a word to her left her wrought with a terrible loneliness. Go to him. Huh? Nanami's brow furrowed in confusion, and she softly searched around herself. Worded. It was her brother's voice. That much she indeed remembered. The voice of her brother, who should have been unconscious. He and I are one in body and soul. He is like another brother to you. Whether it was truly her brother's voice or a mere hallucination, Nanami could not tell, and yet regardless of which it was, she whispered all the same. Yeah, you're right. She whispered to her brother, who still lay on the ground. Nanami stood up and walked toward her older brother's back. She hardly had any strength left. Day after day, she'd been trapped in a pitch-black room, forced to take part in some sick tableau of agonizing crucifixion. She could not even remember how many times she'd thought she would die. Her right hand in particular caused her tremendous amounts of pain, as if a chisel had been struck into it, all the way to the bone. The sensation that she lacked her hand, together with the illusion that it still remained, were tearing her mind in two. I see. The sensation that she lacked her hand. I see. She was exhausted, both mentally and physically. If she lost focus, there was no doubt she would fall to the ground, too drained to get back up again. Therefore, she'd had to make a desperate effort to reach her hand out at this very instant. Even if it took more effort than she could give, she would do everything in her power to make him stop. Wait! she narrowly managed to squeeze something out. And thankfully, he had heard. He halted his stride and looked back toward Nanami. Even though she managed to stop him, she was lost on what exactly to say to him. The reality that this person was not her brother at all, the conviction that this person was her brother, to the end. Those two feelings had blended together in her head, making them even harder to discern. But she gripped her bangle tightly in her left hand. It had been his gift to her, one that felt cold to the touch but warm to the heart. The very existence of this bangle linked both of them, both him and her together. That was how she felt. And that answer was all she needed. Her hesitation instantly faded. Big bro, even though you might not actually be my brother, You're not very reliable, you're a total nerd, always collecting anime, doll things. And you say a lot of mean things. You're never really nice to people, and are pretty much always rude, but you're still my big bro. Trying her hardest to fight back her tears, Nanami smiled as best she could. Thank you, Nanami. Upon gazing at his expression, she saw that her other brother seemed a little embarrassed. And with that, relief washed over Nanami, before slowly putting her consciousness to rest. Does that mean she went unconscious? Oh, yeah. Nanami nearly collapsed, and I hurriedly went to catch her. She lost consciousness. Her face was pale, and she was clearly having trouble breathing. We need to get her to the hospital right away. She's losing an awful lot of blood. The hefty woman, who had introduced herself as Momose, peered at Nanami's face as she voiced her concern. Next, she turned to Shogun. The same goes for the boy resting there. I decided to leave Nanami and Momose-san's care. Keep them safe, please. What are you going to do? There's someone I need to find. So I could learn the whereabouts of Noah II. I'd asked Nanami since she'd been taken there when she was kidnapped, but she wasn't too sure of it herself. In the end, I had no choice but to find Hatano. Is this something you truly must do to overthrow Gladiol? Gladiol. Replace that with Noah II and... Yeah, I do. Ayase's expression stiffened. She took a single step toward me. By the way she slightly dragged her leg, I could tell she had genuinely been injured. Then I will follow. Take me with you. You don't have to do that. Even though I tried to tell her no, she only shook her head in refusal. The seven all must gather. Ayase, I want you and Yua to find someone for me. Their name is Hatano. At the mere mention of her name, Yua jumped a little from her hiding spot behind Momose. I need you to find them because they know where to find Noah II. Even if we don't search together, I'll still know everything you see and hear. So let's split up and start looking. That was the best option we had at the moment. We had to be quick about it. There was no guarantee we'd be safe if another earthquake struck. Understood. Ayase seemed to agree with me, though she didn't look all that happy about it. I'm not quite sure I follow. Narose Genichi has been behind it all since the very beginning. He's the mastermind. So that's how it is. Then please, go do what you need to. I'll take care of everyone here. Amose-san puffed out her chest in a display of bravado. And then she gave a quick nod, likely in an attempt to cheer me on. Just don't do anything rash. And one more favour if you don't mind. If you happen to run into Ban-chan, if you happen to run into a seedy-looking detective with a goofy grin, could you please tell him to contact me? Did she mean Ban Yasuji? I knew all about how he had died. He'd been shot and killed by his own partner. I had unconsciously seen it all unfold. I fully intended to tell Momose-san about this, but... Seriously, what could he possibly be doing at a time like this? Well, that man is full of surprises, so maybe he decided to stop and help out some of the wounded. Momose had to go and say something like that, and now I could no longer bring myself to tell her the truth. Well, you better get going. Thank you. Yeah. Without meaning to, I'd nodded, making a promise I'd never be able to keep. But that had been the only answer I could the only answer I could have ever thought to make. Needlessly, don't need that. Could ever think to make. Could have ever thought to make. Nishijiro-kun. With her head lowered, Yua spoke with a barely audible voice. For a good while now, she'd been nervously taking peeks at me, which made me think she had something to say. Sorry I ever doubted you. And that I ever said such hurtful things to you. The lenses of her glasses were covered in dust, and yet I knew very well that behind them her eyes were wet with tears. Even if I apologise, after everything I did, it would never be enough. But even so, I still want to apologise anyway. I'm so sorry. She bowed her head deeply. I didn't reply. All I did was turn my back to her. The Sarah figures. The ones in my base? Yes? If you want, could you take them off my hands? Huh? Back when she'd deceived me, I couldn't have been more shocked, but now I understood why she'd done what she'd done. So it just felt wrong to say I forgive you or something along those lines. It was true that I had always thought of her as my enemy, but I had no right to make her bow to me, nor any right to forgive her. Are you sure? Yeah. I want you to have them. Alright. Alright. Sometime in the future, let's go buy some new ones together, okay? And with that, you were put on the same gentle smile she'd had when we first met. I nodded to her in response. I exchanged looks with both Iyase and Momose-san. Then I etched the image of Nanami and Shogun into my eyes one last time. And so I began walking along alone among the mountains of rubble once again. Train station? Shinsen Station of the Inakashira line was one stop from Shibuya, with it taking only about a minute to arrive there by train. The station itself was situated within an underground tunnel, resulting in the only natural light being the beams seeping in from the opening at the end of the platform. Due to the earthquake, all of the lights had gone out, enveloping the area in a far thicker darkness than usual. Carefully supporting Arihara Kosui's body, Aoi Senna set foot onto the platform. There'd been no need to buy a ticket. Not a single staff member was present in the vicinity, and none of the ticket machines were in service. Only a glance was necessary to understand how horribly warped the railway tracks had become. It was no wonder that the trains had suspended operation the day before.
Wouldn't you? Ouchie wouchie.
Kazui's left leg was drenched in blood. She'd been deeply cut by broken glass during the earthquake. Senna had attempted to staunch the flow of blood with a towel, but the wound was far worse than she'd supposed. Basic first aid would not suffice. Gigglomaniacs are unable to use their powers to heal wounds. To the brain, pain is an inescapable reminder of reality. Thus, Gigglomaniacs cannot form any sort of mutual recognition to the effect of "I'm not wounded" or "the injury didn't happen." Human instinct would never allow it. Unless you gave them some kind of anesthetic, right?
I don't want to walk any more.
Even with Kazui's teary protests, Senna remained wordless as she marched intently towards Shinsen Station. Only one thing held her focus, something she refused to divert any attention from. When they at last reached the deserted platform, Senna quickly pulled back the arm she'd been using to support Kazui. With no strength remaining in one of her legs, Kazui immediately collapsed to the ground.
Huh?
Kazui lifted her gaze in bewilderment, but Senna paid her no mind. Glaring motionlessly, at a certain point in the distance, the black-haired girl gritted her teeth.
Finally. I finally found you.
At the end of her gaze, in the dark recesses of the platform, sat a lone human figure.
Woes! That's Senna-chan's pappy!
It was a homeless man, clad in filthy rags. In his hands he held a sign that read, "The hearts of the people face annihilation." Senna slowly approached the man.
Who is that message directed toward?
Her voice was cold and unfeeling, a tone that could freeze all who came in contact with it. To those who can change negative into positive, it's my last will and testament. Senna. Keeping his head hung low, the homeless man did not even look at his daughter in the eye as he dispassionately spoke her name.
Don't say my name like we're family. For the past 6 months, I've only thought of one thing. How I would finally kill you.
Don't do that. I thank you for that.
Why the hell are you thanking me?
For entirely selfish reasons. That perhaps the most I can do is to atone is to let you kill me. Those are where my thoughts lie.
Say no more.
Don't do it. It's a mistake. Senna real-booted her D-sword. The method she'd chosen for her father's execution was death by a D-sword. The simplicity behind it laid the truth bare. The way she killed him did not matter. All that mattered was killing him at all. I'm sorry. Atana still refused to raise his head.
Why are you apologising?
Because this act will follow you for the rest of your life, and I placed it on you. Patricide. Is that how you pronounce that? Obviously it's killing your father. Patricide? Carries a great weight.
I don't care what happens to me, so long as I can kill you. You killed my mother and sister.
That is indeed the truth. Oh, hang on, maybe she said that.
And they died in such horrible, horrible ways.
Senna could only act calm and collected for so long. As her emotions began to take control, she was seized by a fierce tremble. I never wanted you to see that. No. Please disregard what I just said.
Why did you do it?
To explain the process behind it all would be meaningless. You would not accept it, nor would it change the outcome. Senna thrusted the tip of her D-sword toward Hatano's head.
Is this your way of running away again?
I was gravely mistaken. There's nothing more I can say.
I'm so disappointed in you. What is it you still expect of me?
Oh, maybe that was him. Everything in the world, people included, is an electronic device. You said that yourself, Senna. Senna's shoulders trembled. For nearly 3 years, ever since Hatano had begun the Mana project, the two of them had rarely come into contact, and yet despite this significant time apart, Hatano had seen right through her, something which troubled her to no end. Distraught by the sheer discomfort she felt, the wavering of her heart morphed into nothing but pure fury, dispelling any form of reason she still had within her. Don't be deceived, Senna. If we were just electronic devices, then even your hatred toward me would be nothing more than electrical signals. Hatano is just trying to overwhelm me. That was what Senna told herself. Calm down.
Your words mean nothing to me.
You cannot let your actions be ruled by emotions. If you don't maintain control, you'll end up facing contradictions. Reject those words. They're the product of a mental attack. Suspend your judgment.
Enough talk.
Senna tried to take a stance with her D-sword. But before she could, Hatano suddenly stood up. Hozui watched their exchange with unease, and when she wondered if she should interfere, the pain in her leg forced her to abandon all hope of doing so. She was not sad, but that did not stop her from weeping deep within herself. Hatano took one large step forward. Her response delayed, Senna switched to an offensive position, but in her attempt to brace herself, her feet slipped on the gravel. As her body shook and staggered, her stance began to collapse. Any sort of edge her appearance had once held disappeared, and in its place came a great fear. Her hatred toward her father was what had given her the strength to persist, but now that the time had come to face him at last, she found herself deeply afraid. She did not quite understand why that was. All she knew was that the cause lay within the words he had just spoken. Hatano threw himself at her with tremendous speed.
No!
Uh-oh. As she flew backward, ignoring both gravity and centrifugal force alike, she swung her enormous D-sword up from below. Oh my god. He's dead. The blade first carved out the tile of the platform floor, and then it slashed straight through her father's shoulder. It moved with a fluidity akin to a hot knife through butter. Her father's hands sent her flying backward. Fresh blood burst from her father's injury. Her eyes were coloured with an expression of deep relief. His eyes. Senna's teeth sank into her lip. Not even a second later, something pierced her father's chest at lightning speed. Tearing in through his back, it flew straight through the man's chest, very narrowly grazed Senna, then swiftly disappeared. Now blood gushed out from, not just from his shoulders, but from his chest as well. The crimson liquid flowed from his wounds, splattered against Senna's cheeks. A bullet? Having been thrown backward the moment Senna landed on her rear, her head shot right back up and she frantically searched for the shooter.
Oopsie! Swing and a miss!
Oh, hang on. I guess that's not Kazui. A man stood in the crossway between the Shinsen Station tunnel and the tunnel leading to Shibuya Station, the sole place illuminated by a gaping patch of sky above. He was holding a handgun. Well, even then I'd say that was still pretty darn good for the ranger man. Senna's father collapsed beside her. Half of his body was already soaked in blood. No. Were you protecting me? Overcome with disbelief, Senna fixed her gaze upon the pool of blood spilling over the tile floor. Words breed chaos. Gasping for air, her father weakly spoke. You're much too honest, Senna. When I see you shine so, I'm left fraught with a terrible sadness and overwhelmed with affection. The bullet had been meant for Senna, but Hatano had taken it in her place. She'd been trying to take her father's life, but he had given it for her instead. You're kidding me. Senna tightened a grip on her D-sword that she held in her hand. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's no biggie. The Hatano daddy-daughter duo dying was all part of the plan anyway. An odd noise echoed throughout the platform, a sound Senna instantly recognised as a Noah 2 terminal. How long has that sound been going on for? Senna would not let it continue. The existence of the man who had stepped between her and her father, the man whose gun had prematurely ended their resolution, was something she would not let continue. How dare you! Get in the way between... When she stood up and fixed her eyes ahead, the cries of an infant began to resound throughout the dimly lit platform. A sense of strange discomfort grew in her hands, and for some reason she could not comprehend, instead of a sword, she was clutching a decayed, desiccated baby. Ah! In an action motivated by reflex, she cast it away from her. But immediately after she'd done so, she realised that child was her own sister. Her sister, whom she'd only seen once before, long ago. Her sister whose name she did not know, and whose own mother had devoured her until hardly anything remained. That was the child before her. Large avulsions where chunks of meat had been bitten free covered her entire frame. Oh my god. Each tear in her dry skin provided a window to view glistening fragments of white bone and the pink scraps of flesh adhered to them. That is so graphic. Senna began to tremble once more. She could not take her eyes off of it. She could not forgive herself for feeling disgust at her own sister, let alone tossing her aside like filth. It was exactly like back then, when she'd seen her own mother's last moments. Her mother, who had died while ruled completely by madness. Still nestled within her mother's arms, her sister had been shredded to pieces and consumed, left only as a heap of pitiful remains. In response to the sight that she'd been forced to witness, rather than sadness or horror, what she'd felt was pure, utter revulsion. Remnants of guilt remained lodged deep within her chest. Despising her father was her way of averting her eyes from the emotion. Oi. Even though a part of her very much knew that this was an attack brought on by a delusion, it reawakened feelings that had been sealed deep within her heart, leaving her entirely motionless. It was as if her wrists and ankles were bound. Oh. But Senna was not the only one suffering from such a state. Kazooie was as well. And we will see what's going on with Kazooie next time on Borderline Games. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Chaos Head, and I will see you next time. Have a great evening, take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.